My grandson sat there in a $1,000 suit, smirking like a kid who just pulled the wings off a fly, while the attorney shuffled the pages of my late wife's will. He looked at me the way you'd look at a stain on the carpet. "You're walking out of here with nothing, old man," he said, just loud enough for the room to catch it. "Better start getting used to the shelter food." He was right that I'd been living thin. He was right that on paper I looked like a retired carpenter who couldn't afford a new pair of work boots. What he didn't know was that the woman in that casket had spent 43 years married to a man who built his life on quiet preparation. When the attorney turned to the next page, my grandson's face did something I'll never forget. It collapsed. My name is Augustus Pennyfeather. Most people just called me Gus. I'm 71 years old, and what I'm about to tell you is the story of how I taught the boy I'd raised since he was 8. That the man you ignore at the dinner table is sometimes the only one who knows where every door in the house is locked. If you've ever been treated like dead weight by your own blood, hit that like button and tell me in the comments what state you're watching from. I want to know how far this thing carries. The cemetery sat on the hill outside Asheville, North Carolina, and the wind that morning had teeth in it. Maribel Ann Pennyfeather, my wife, had asked to be buried under a maple tree she used to sit beneath when she came up to think. She'd been gone 4 days. The cancer took her quick at the end, the way she'd asked it to. I stood at the edge of the gathering with my hat in my hands, and my grandson Cormac stepped between me and the casket like a bouncer at a club. "Family up front, Gus," he said. He hadn't called me Grandpa in 6 years. Not since he started his second software company and decided his last name needed to sound different in a press release. "You can stand by the gate. Try not to make the photos awkward. Bryony's got the camera crew here for the tribute reel." Bryony, his wife. She was over by the headstone in a black dress that probably cost more than my truck, holding her phone up at angles, mouthing words to herself, practicing the cry. I watched her dab at a dry eye for the camera and turn her face just so to catch the light through the branches. I didn't say a word. I walked to the back. I stood under a different tree, an old white oak, and I watched them lower my wife into the ground. Maribel and I had been together since 1981. We'd legally separated 9 years ago, but only on paper, only because her brother's lawsuit threatened everything she'd built, and we needed the assets in different names. Every Wednesday, she came to my little place out by the river with a thermos of coffee and the New York Times crossword. Every birthday, I bought her a single sunflower because that's what she carried at our wedding. Cormac never knew any of that. He saw a grandfather with grease under his fingernails and a grandmother with a private wing in her name at the regional hospital. And he drew the only conclusion his mind had room for. When the priest finished, Bryony came clicking across the wet grass in her heels and shoved an envelope at my chest. Heavy paper, cream-colored. I half thought it might be a note from Maribel, something she'd left with them. It was an eviction notice, 72 hours to vacate the cabin on Hollow Creek Road. I read it twice. I looked up. Cormac was right behind her with that smirk again. "The cabin's part of the estate now, Gus. I'm liquidating. You've had a free ride long enough." Bryony sniffed. "We figure we can flip that property for $250 easy, maybe $3. The land's worth more without the structure. You understand business, don't you, Gus?" "Oh, wait, right." She laughed. It was the small, ugly sound. Cormac put a hand on my shoulder. It was the first time he'd touched me in 2 years. 3 days. "I'm not playing. And don't bother showing up tomorrow at the reading. It'll embarrass us both." He patted my shoulder twice and walked off with his arm around her waist. They climbed into a leased Range Rover and pulled away with the back tires kicking up mud across my one good pair of shoes. I stood there a long minute. I looked at Maribel's grave. I took out my flip phone, the one Cormac liked to make jokes about at Thanksgiving when they were still a Thanksgiving, and I dialed a number I'd memorized 15 years ago. "Mr. Pennyfeather," the voice said. "Roland." They served me at the graveside. A pause, then a small dry laugh on the other end, about when she said they would. "Are we ready for tomorrow?" We've been ready for 9 years, Gus. Run it. And turn the thermostat down in the conference room. I want them shivering. I hung up. I didn't go back to the cabin to pack. I drove to a little diner off Tunnel Road, and I ordered black coffee and a slice of cherry pie, and I sat in a vinyl booth for 2 hours with a yellow legal pad. I wasn't writing down what to do. I'd known what to do for 9 years. I was writing down what to do for 9 years. I was writing down what they didn't know. I knew. There was a number, 41 million, that was the value of the estate. And there were other numbers, 1.8. That was Cormac's debt to a private equity friend who'd loaned him bridge capital after his last startup folded and was now charging him personal interest because the company was a shell. 390,000, that was the credit line Bryony had been hiding from her husband. And 0. That was the number of people who taught either of them what an honest day's work felt like. I'd done that, by the way. The teaching gap. I owned that one. I let Maribel's success and my own embarrassment about it raise the boy. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. The next morning, I drove down to a glass tower in downtown Charlotte. Roland Massey had been Maribel's attorney for 26 years. He'd helped us bury more bodies than a backhoe. The receptionist tried to send me away. Then Roland came out himself in a charcoal suit and held the door for me like I was the king of Spain. The conference room was already half full when I walked in. Cormac at one end of the long table with a glass of bourbon at 10 in the morning. Bryony beside him, her phone face up on the wood, a live stream already running. They looked up when I came in and Cormac actually rolled his eyes. I told you not to come. I pulled a metal folding chair out from the corner and sat by the door. I let my shoulders slump. I let my chin drop a little. I am very good at looking like a man who has lost. I just want to hear what she wanted, I said quietly. She wanted you out of her life, Bryony muttered. That's why she divorced you. Roland sat at the head of the table. He set down a leather portfolio thick as a phone book. He cleared his throat and started in on the assets. The lake house at Lake Lure, 4.6. The condo in Naples, 2.8. The biotech holdings, 21.5. Cash and bonds, 11 and change. He read the totals out, and Cormac whispered, "Yacht baby," to his wife and clinked his glass against her water bottle. To my grandson, Cormac James Pennyfeather, Roland read, and his wife Bryony, I leave nothing. I'd never seen a man go that white that fast. Cormac stood up. The bourbon sloshed. What? Bryony grabbed his sleeve. It's a typo. It has to be a typo. Roland turned the page slowly. The sound of paper turning was the loudest sound in the building. However, he read. Cormac sat back down. He held onto the word like a man hanging off a ledge. However, all assets of the estate shall be transferred in their entirety into the Maribel and Pennyfeather Discretionary Trust, sole and absolute trustee with full discretion over distributions, capital, and disposition of all assets, named in this instrument and confirmed in supplemental documentation, is Augustus Pennyfeather. Silence. Real silence. The kind of silence where you can hear the building. Cormac turned his head like it weighed 100 pounds. He looked at me sitting in the folding chair by the door. Him, he said. That's correct, Roland said. Him, the guy who fixes lawnmowers for cash. Your grandfather, Roland said, is the only person on earth who can write you a check, sell that house you're living in, or transfer a single share of stock. If you want to fill your gas tank, Mr. Pennyfeather, you'll need to ask your grandfather for permission. Bryony screamed. I don't mean a yelp. I mean a real scream, the kind animals make in traps. The live stream caught it. I stood up. I unbuttoned my old gray suit jacket and buttoned it again the proper way. I walked to the head of the table, and Roland stood up and pulled out the leather chair for me. I sat in it. I opened the portfolio. I didn't bother with the asset pages. I went straight to the back, to the section labeled Liabilities, and I put on my reading glasses, the real ones, the prescription pair I never wore around either of them. Cormac, I said, Says here you owe 1.8 million to a man named Dexter Holm. Says he's been calling your private cell. Says the last voicemail mentioned what he'd do to your knees. Cormac's mouth opened. And Bryony, I said. 390,000 on a credit line you opened in your father-in-law's name. That's a felony, sweetheart. That's a real one. She closed the live stream so fast I heard the app chime through the phone speaker. Here's where we are, I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice I'd used my whole working life, supervising framing crews on job sites where one bad decision meant somebody's wife got a call. I have a fiduciary duty as trustee, paying off a venture capitalist who calls himself a lender, and a woman who shops at Bergdorf's on stolen credit does not qualify as a prudent distribution. Request denied. Grandpa, Cormac said. The word cracked in his mouth. Don't. Grandpa, those guys are going to hurt me. The eviction thing was a joke. We were grieving. Tell him, Bryn. I tossed the eviction notice across the table. It slid to a stop in front of him. I'll vacate the cabin, I said. You're right about that. 3 days is plenty. However, I borrowed the word. He flinched at it. The lake house at Lake Lure is now trust property. I'll be conducting an inventory. Effective immediately, you and your wife will need to vacate the premises. You've been staying there since Maribel went into hospice 6 months ago. That ends today. There's a small rental property available on Hollow Creek Road. 2 bedrooms, gravel drive, propane heat. It's available in 72 hours. Rent is $2,000 a month. Don't be late. He stared at me. He picked up the eviction notice. He looked at it the way a man looks at his own palm. I stood up. Meeting's adjourned, I said. I walked out, and Roland followed me to the elevator. He waited until the doors closed before he laughed. Just once. Just a short cough of a thing. He's going to do something stupid, Roland said. I'm counting on it. For 3 days I lived out of a Holiday Inn off I-40. My phone rang 61 times. I picked up exactly 0 of them. Bryony went on her live stream that first night in a gray sweatshirt with no makeup, her eyes red, and told her followers her husband's grandfather was a sociopath holding their inheritance hostage out of pure cruelty. The donations rolled in. People I'd never met were sending her $20 at a time to feel like they'd done something righteous. The next morning I was served. Cormac had filed for emergency removal of trustee on the grounds that I was suffering from cognitive decline. He had an affidavit from a Dr. Vance Leonard claiming he'd examined me 8 days before Maribel died and found early-stage dementia. I'd never met Dr. Vance Leonard. Roland told me Leonard had a backroom arrangement with a certain kind of family lawyer, $5,000, and you got whatever diagnosis you needed. It'll freeze the trust, Roland said over the phone. Court won't move on it for 3 months. He doesn't have 3 months. Dexter Holm doesn't wait 3 months. What do you want to do? I want to provoke him. I checked out of the hotel and drove up to the lake house. I still had the gate code Maribel had given me when she bought the place in 2014. The gate swung open. I drove up the long pine-lined driveway and parked behind Cormac's Range Rover. The front door wasn't locked. I walked in. The smell hit me first. Pizza boxes and weed. Then I saw the price tags. Little white stickers on the bronze sculptures on the antique sideboard Maribel had hauled back from an auction in Savannah on the painting over the fireplace that had been her grandmother's. 2,000. 5,000. 12,000. Cormac was in the great room handing a roll of cash to a man in a corduroy jacket I didn't recognize. What's happening here? I said. Every head in the room turned. The man in corduroy looked at Cormac, looked at me, set the painting down carefully against the wall and said, "I'll come back another time," and walked out the front door without his coat. Cormac came at me. Not physically. Verbally. Yelling about how it was his house, his mother's house, his birthright. Bryony came down the stairs wearing one of Maribel's cashmere wraps. The navy one I'd given her for our 30th, and she pointed at me like I was a stain. "You're not even legally family," she hissed. "You're an ex-husband. You're nothing. Take off the rat, Bryony. Make me. The sirens were already coming up the hill. I'd called the Rutherford County Sheriff before I drove through the gate. Cormac heard them and his face did that thing again. The collapse. He grabbed the small porcelain vase off the mantel, a Qing dynasty piece Maribel had paid $48,000 for at Sotheby's, and he held it over his head. I'll smash it. I swear to God. Go ahead, I said. He didn't move. It's insured. The trust gets paid. You add felony destruction of property to your record. Swing away, son. His arms shook. His face was wet. He set the vase down very gently on the carpet and sank down beside it like a child and started to cry into his hands. Real crying. The first real thing I'd seen him do in years. Why do you hate me, Grandpa? I don't hate you, Cormac. You're killing me. I'm trying to wake you up. The deputies came through the front door. They didn't arrest him. It wasn't that kind of crime yet. They escorted him and Bryony off the property and gave them 20 minutes to gather personal items only. I stood on the porch and watched them load duffel bags into the Range Rover. Bryony was screaming at the deputies about her social media reach. Cormac just kept looking at the front door of the house, like if he stared hard enough he could go back in. When they were gone, I locked the door and walked through the empty house. I went to Maribel's office on the second floor. She'd told me once, years ago, in passing, that she kept a copy of her real diary in a place no one would ever look. If anything ever happens to me, Gus, check the cookbook. I'd laughed at the time. Now I went down to the kitchen and pulled her copy of Joy of Cooking off the shelf. Hollowed out. Inside was a small brown notebook and a sealed envelope with my name on it. The letter was 3 pages. I'm not going to read you all of it. I'll tell you the part that mattered. She wrote that she'd known for 2 years that Cormac was draining her brokerage accounts in small amounts. She wrote that she'd let him do it. She wrote that the 3rd time she caught him, she set up the trust. She wrote that she wasn't punishing him. She was saving him. Gus, he's gonna hate you for a long time. He's gonna do things that will break your heart. Don't bend. Don't give him $1 he hasn't earned. Let him hit the bottom. The bottom is the only floor he'll ever trust to stand on. I'm sorry I'm leaving this to you. You were always the strong one. You just never made anyone feel small for it. I sat on her office floor and I cried for the first time since the funeral. Not for me. For her. For the years I let go by because I thought money was a thing to be embarrassed about, instead of a tool. My phone rang. Blocked number. Mr. Pennyfeather, we represent Mr. Holm. Your grandson owes us 1.8, plus accrued. Now that you're handling his accounts, we wanted to introduce ourselves. I don't owe you anything. No, sir. But your roof is woodshake, and that cabin of yours doesn't have a sprinkler system, and it'd be a real shame if we didn't get to do business. I hung up. I dialed Roland. They threatened me. Call the police, won't help. Roland, I'm going to buy the debt. You're going to do what? My retirement is $1,200,000. I can put $900 down today and finance the rest. I'm going to buy Cormac's debt at a discount, then I'm going to make him work it off washing dishes for the next 20 years if I have to. Gus, that's your whole nest egg. I'm not protecting a nest egg, Roland. I'm protecting a boy. I met Dexter Holmes' lawyers in a steakhouse in Charlotte. I put a cashier's check on the table for $900,000. They took it. The debt was bad and they knew it. They signed the assignment over a basket of dinner rolls. By the time I left the restaurant, I owned every dollar Cormac had ever borrowed from a man with bad intentions. That night, I sat in the Holiday Inn and I watched the security feed from the lake house, which I'd had installed as soon as the deputies cleared them out. They'd checked into a Days Inn in Hendersonville. They were splitting a pizza out of a box on the bed. Bryony was crying. Cormac was not. He was on his phone, probably trying to figure out which other lender hadn't gotten the memo yet. I sent him a text from a number tied to a shell company called Maple Hollow, LLC. Mr. Pennyfeather, your outstanding balance has been acquired by our firm. First payment of $15,000 is due in 48 hours. Failure to remit will result in legal action against all assets, present and future. I watched on the feed. He read the text. He showed it to Bryony. She stopped crying. She started screaming. He threw his phone against the wall. That was the night they decided to have me committed. She'd been talking about it on a private group chat. She didn't know I'd had Roland's subpoena through a friendly judge. 2 days later, at 6 in the evening, there was a pounding on my Holiday Inn door. 2 paramedics. 2 sheriff's deputies. Dr. Sam Eyes the Croot. Vance Leonard, sweating through a department store suit, holding a clipboard like a shield. And behind them, Cormac, with his face arranged in an expression of theatrical concern that wouldn't have fooled a 5-year-old. "Sir," the lead deputy said, "we've received a credible report. You're a danger to yourself. We have an order for emergency psychiatric evaluation." "Officer, I'm sitting here drinking herbal tea. Look around." "He told us he had a gun," Bryony called from the hallway. "He said he was going to use it on himself. He said the voices told him to." Leonard nodded gravely. "Acute paranoid presentation. We need to transport immediately." I let them. I held my hands up. I let them strap me to a gurney. The lead paramedic was a tall man named Hutchings, whose name tag I'd had Roland verify 3 days earlier. Hutchings was wearing a body camera under his uniform shirt. He was also my old foreman's son. He'd been ready for this call for a week. They wheeled me down the service elevator past a small crowd. They loaded me into the ambulance. Leonard climbed in the front. The doors slammed. The siren came on. We drove 4 blocks, and the siren clicked off, and Hutchings pulled the mask down off his face and held up the body cam. "Got every word, Mr. Pennyfeather." Got Leonard claiming 5 years of treatment history. Got Bryony lying about the gun. Got your grandson on camera saying, and I quote, "Just keep him under until we sign the paperwork." Cloud uploaded. Timestamped. Witnessed. He unstrapped me. I sat up and rubbed my wrists. "Where's Leonard going?" "Cousin's driving him to what he thinks is a private clinic. It's actually the back of the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office. By the time he wakes up from the bottle of water he's about to drink, there'll be a confession on a desk for him to sign." The next morning, the federal warrant came down. Conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Filing a false medical diagnosis. They picked up Leonard first. They picked up Cormac at a restaurant where he was meeting another lender. They picked up Bryony in the lobby of a hotel where she was trying to charm a bail bondsman. I went down to the county jail 2 weeks later. I sat in the visitation booth and I waited, and the door buzzed, and my grandson walked in wearing orange. He picked up the phone on his side. I picked up mine. "Grandpa." I looked at him. I looked for a long moment. I looked for the boy I'd taught to bait a hook on the dock at Lake Lure when he was 9. I couldn't find him. I think he was still in there somewhere, but he was buried under 20 years of being told he was special by people who had never met him. "Cormac, get me out. Please. Mom's gone. Grandma's gone. I have nobody." "You'll have your wife. For about another 6 weeks by my count." "What?" "She's already cooperating. She's testifying she had no knowledge of the loan forgery. She's blaming all of it on you. Her parents put their house up for her bond. She'll get probation. You'll get 15 years, maybe 12 with good behavior. The federal charges hit hard, son." He stared at me through the scratched plexiglass. "I'm putting $50 in your commissary account on the 1st of every month," I said. "Not a dollar more. Not for shoes, not for protection, not for phone time. $50. If you want more, the laundry job pays 12 cents an hour. You're enjoying this." "No, I really am not." "Then why?" I leaned forward. "Because for 34 years, Cormac, you never asked the price of anything. Your grandmother and I, we filled every cup the second it got low. You never knew thirst, so you never knew water. Now you're going to learn what $50 buys. It buys soap. It buys toothpaste. It buys a phone call to the lawyer I'm not paying for. You make it last 30 days. Then you do it again for 180 months. He started to cry. Not the performance crying from the funeral. Real crying. The kind I hadn't seen on his face since he was 9. "I'm sorry, Grandpa. I know. Will you come back? On the 1st of every month. to look at you through this glass and remind you that your grandmother loved you so much she was willing to let you hate me forever to save your life. You think about that. I hung up the phone. He kept his on his ear for a long time after. That was 4 years ago. The cabin on Hollow Creek Road is still mine, but I don't sleep there much anymore. The lake house at Lake Lure is no longer a private residence. The trust converted it 18 months ago into the Maribel and Pennyfeather Center for Working Families in Crisis. It's a residential program for single parents who've lost everything in a medical bankruptcy. We have 19 rooms. We're full every night. There's a waiting list. I run the maintenance shop in the old boathouse. I fix the toilets. I tutor the older kids in long division on Tuesdays. I taught a 12-year-old named Jolene how to swing a framing hammer last Thursday. She drove a 16-penny nail clean in 3 hits and looked up at me with a face I last saw on Maribel in 1983. Cormac comes up for parole in 8 years. I write him every other week. He writes back now. Real letters. He's working in the prison library. He read a book last month about restorative justice and asked me what I thought of it. I told him I thought it was about time he picked up a book that wasn't a sales pitch. I don't know if he'll come out a different man. Maribel wrote in that letter that the bottom was the only floor he'd ever trust. Some days I believe her. Some days I'm not sure he's hit it yet. But he hasn't asked for money in 2.5 years, and last spring he sent me a Father's Day card, the first one of my life. If you're sitting somewhere right now, in Ohio or Tennessee or Bakersfield or some little town nobody on TV has ever heard of, and your kids or your grandkids look right through you because the numbers in your bank account aren't loud enough for them, I want you to hear me. The quiet ones built the road they're driving on. Don't let anybody hand you an envelope at a graveside and tell you what your life is worth. You hand them the envelope, you decide. Like the video if it found you. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single one. And subscribe if you want to hear what happens the day my grandson walks out those gates. Because he's going to, and I'm going to be there in my old gray suit. And we'll see what kind of man 8 more years of $50 a month makes out of a boy who once thought he could buy his grandfather's silence with a smirk. I've turned this story over in my hands 1,000 times since the day they led Cormac out of that courtroom in handcuffs. And what I keep coming back to is something my father told me when I was 19 years old, working a framing crew outside Knoxville. He said a house only falls down 2 ways. Either the foundation was wrong from the start, or somebody removed a load-bearing wall while pretending it was decorative. Maribel and I, we were the load-bearing wall in that boy's life. And one of us, me, stepped aside for 30 years because I was embarrassed about the difference between her bank account and mine. I let him grow up thinking the cup was bottomless. That was on me. Every drop of what came later started in that decision. The thing I want anyone watching this to understand is that cause and effect doesn't skip generations, and it doesn't take bribes. Cormac didn't wake up one morning a man who'd switch his grandmother's medication. He got there one small permission at a time, one ignored tantrum at a time, one silver platter solution at a time. We built that road for him with our own 2 hands while we were busy congratulating ourselves on how comfortable we'd made his childhood. And then we acted shocked when he drove down it. I think a person needs 3 things to stand on their own feet in this world. And I think those 3 things have to be earned, not handed over. The first one is decency. The willingness to do right when nobody's watching and there's no profit in it. The second one is wits. Real ones. The kind that let you tell the difference between a man who's helping you and a man who's setting you up for the kill. The third is grit. Plain old grit. The thing that gets you out of bed at 5 in the morning to do work nobody's clapping for. Cormac never had to develop any of the 3 because we kept stocking the shelf for him. By the time he was 34, he was a man with no decency, no wits worth having, and no grit at all. Just hunger. Bryony was the same animal in a different coat. 2 empty cups looking for a faucet. Maribel saw it before I did. She wrote in that letter that the bottom is the only floor he'd ever trust. And I don't know if she was right. I won't know for years. But I know this. The $50 a month I send him isn't punishment. It's school. It's the school we never put him in. And every month that he makes those $50 stretch, every month he chooses soap over a candy bar, he's earning the first dollar of his life. If you're a parent or a grandparent watching this, hear me. The kindest thing you can do for the people you love is hand them something heavy and walk away long enough for them to learn how to carry it. Comfort given too early is just damage on a delay.